Thank you for auditing Professor Skye's record review, the only first listen new music review show hosted by a French professor immediately after finishing grading all of the exams for French 112. Whew, what a semester. So today I'm going to be reviewing an album by the band I Break Horses. The name of the album is called Warning. And, you know, as part of my job as a professor and a wordsmith and a critic, I'm trying to think of analogies and metaphors that work and similes. And I have trouble choosing the right one. So basically 2 weeks ago, I reviewed an album by Hazel English, which apparently was a part of a genre called Dreampop. Here's a link to that video. It's a pretty good one. And in it, I sort of talk about the nature of what is Dreampop? I know that it's related to shoegaze music, which I have trouble defining myself as well. And so when I saw that this album came out, I saw that it's loosely defined as being shoegaze, loosely defined as being dreampop. I wanted to go further and understand what is it that makes this genre what it is. The nice thing is that these two albums have basically nothing to do with each other. Okay, you have a female singer, you have kind of a dreamy atmosphere, but beyond that, the sort of super heavy Phil Spector wall of sound that defines the Hazel English album isn't really on here. I Break Horses is much more electronic, much more based in, I would sort of say, in this feeling of layers. So I got onto this whole concept, maybe the way to define shoegaze music, and this could go all the way back to My Bloody Valentine, is to figure out the best way to talk about layers in music. Because that's really what it is that makes it so fascinating. That's what makes it have this feeling that you're listening to something so lush and so textured, yet something that doesn't always have something you can grab a hold to. There's no riffs in shoegaze music. There's instances, little melodies that trail off, that come in late and leave early. Like someone at a party. But there's not something to really grab onto. So I thought about layers. I thought, maybe it's like a good bean dip. That was my first metaphor. But first of all, there's no such thing as a good bean dip. You can come at me. If you have a recipe for a good bean dip, you can put it in the section. They're never good. And so I asked my wife, who I believe I will refer to as Dr. Mrs. Payne from now on. I asked Dr. Mrs. Payne, what do you think? You're a good chef, and what's a good metaphor for layers in food? And she said rather unexpectedly, a croissant. Because croissants, of course, are made with layers. And it's only through those layers that they have the strength to be such a lovely, wonderful, fluffy food. But the difficulty is I don't always think of layers when I think of croissants. I just think of something that you eat. So you're going to hear Toby in the background. He's causing me all sorts of trouble today. This is the third time I had to start this video because he keeps clicking and clacking with his toes. So I was thinking of the croissant, and I think this is the best metaphor, that when it's well done, when this music is well done, it has that feeling of where it holds together, but you kind of bite into it and it sort of dissolves. And it's all based on almost how seamless and how fragile it is. So maybe shoegaze music, maybe I Break Horses is like a croissant. But then I came up with a better non-food related metaphor. All that work just to look at the cover of the album. If you look at the cover of the album, we have one of the singers. They're from Sweden, apparently. It's a duo, a man and a woman. The woman sings, and I don't know what the man does. I guess he makes a lot of music. And you see how here it has this double exposure image of her. This made me think about double exposure photography. I mean, I actually had kind of a double exposure. It used to be you could get Polaroids that would take double exposure photographs. And so I would do this. I would take portraits of all my friends. I would do portraits of myself. Look at me there with my awesome cool hair. Here I am rocking a pair of sunglasses. Pretty cool dude. So when you think about this double exposure, I think this is actually the best metaphor for how this music feels, how it sounds, and how it is intended to be consumed. Because when you have a double image photograph, it feels like a dream. It feels as though, a double exposure photograph, it feels as though it's real. You can recognize this as a 20-year-old Skye, right? You recognize each of those people as me. But having them together is a little bit uncanny. It feels a little bit unreal. I look like a ghost at the same time as I look like a real person. And that's the feeling of the music. There is recognizable melody, there is recognizable instrumentation, but the whole time it's like you might just disappear. So that's where I'm going to start. That's how I'm going to define I Break Horses and this kind of shoegaze music. And if I look back at all the music I've ever called shoegazy, this all really works. Double exposure photography. I would also say there's something I feel very European about shoegaze music. I know a lot of it's come from America, but I think it has to do with a train. See, when you drive, you have to be thinking. Your brain has to be engaged. And so there's driving music. And I think Americans are great at making music that makes you dance, 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 you know, like kind of driving along. But when you're in a train, which is how many Europeans, if not most Europeans, have done most of their traveling, you're passive. And you can look out at the landscape as it goes by. And music like this, extended music, long music for nice, long, extended train rides works quite nicely. So I do think there's a part of that too. There's a sort of passivity, a sort of lack of drive, which is in of itself a beautiful aesthetic. And it's in this time where my biggest complaint about all shoegaze music, about all this double exposure music, is that I don't, like I said, there's nothing I can really grab onto. And that's especially true with lyrics and singers. I often feel as though the singers are just lost. Just where are they? Where'd they go? Where are the lyrics? It's when you're really focused and you can look out at the landscape as it goes past that you can start to pick out the words. I've been struggling with this album for 6 days. I've done 2 reviews since I started listening to it because I didn't know how I was going to approach it. It was only when I came up with this idea of the double exposure and the bean dip that I was like, okay, I have something to say. I know what I want to say about this music. But the fact that I couldn't pick up the lyrics until the 4th or 5th time listening was a sign to me that that's maybe what keeps me a little bit distant from it. I like to be able to grab onto the lyrics, grab onto something. It's very American of me. It is interesting that the name of the band is I Break Horses. I immediately thought, oh, that's a Smog song. And it turns out that they are named after that Smog song. And that made me think, could Smog be considered shoegaze? Certainly not in the way that he produces his music. You know, it's not quite as much layers, but there is a dreamlike quality to Bill Callahan's singing, and certainly the song I Break Horses with mysterious lyrics, and it's kind of depressing, sad comment on a broken relationship or a relationship that will be broken. It's really intriguing, the idea of Smog as being a kind of proto shoegaze inspiration. I don't know. So what I want to do now, I'm going to go track through track of this album. It's funny because I was listening to it, and I was listening to it in the car with Dr. and Mrs. Skye, Dr. and Mrs. Payne, and I was like, who wants to listen to this? Like, I like it, and it's good, but like, who is like looking forward to hearing it? She's like, I am. And then this morning I was doing one last listen while grading those previously mentioned 112 exams. And I was like, oh crap, I like this too. It really does grow on you. And I'm gonna play you a song from one of the last tracks called Death Engine. And I'm just gonna play this section. And I think this shows perfectly the aesthetic and the emotion and the feeling that goes into this music. It's her singing the end of a line, and there's this kind of warbly garbled keyboard that comes in that's almost church-like. There's a very kind of reverent feeling on this whole album. And so and then the drums come in, this drum machine, do. And what happens is you don't get riffs stuck in your head, but you get these flaky layers stuck in your head. You get this like this desire to hear again how they layer this in. So I'm going to play this for you. You're not going to get it on the first try. So you're going to have to listen to it multiple times outside of this video. But just listen to this as it leads into this keyboard bit. You hear that? So what happens is, you know, when I was listening to it for the last time, I was like, I can't wait for her to say, straight into the night, and the drums coming up. That's a great example of how this album makes you feel. And I don't know. My ignorance is profound. I don't know if this is typical shoegaze. I don't know if this is an off branch of shoegaze. I don't know if this isn't even shoegaze. This is just indie pop, just indie rock. I don't know. But I know that I love this feeling, this double exposure feeling. So let me go kind of track by track in my Pink Citroën here and describe to you a little bit more about different tracks that I like. The opening is a 9-minute epic called Turn. And it's cool because it starts with a very distorted drum. It kind of reminds me of 5 Years by David Bowie, just, you know, Ziggy Stardust, just the idea of starting off an album with a very strong drum beat, but it's kind of a distorted drum beat, covered with, you know, then it gets covered up by these xylophones. Again, the instrumentation appears to be intentionally dreamy, very dreamy. Like, is it really there? Xylophones, distorted drums. But the strength in the song really comes from the drums and the way they interact with the vocals. And this reminded me very strongly of the song Nothing Compares to You by Sinead O'Connor. Did you know that Prince wrote that song? I know, but Sinead O'Connor made it what it is. Her voice is what makes that song so great, not Prince. Hot take. But it really put me in that mode. And, you know, I grew up when Nothing Compares to You was popular, and I remember hating it. I remember being at a middle school dance and being miserable and sad and hearing this song and like being against everything that's popular. And I remember thinking, actually, I kind of like this song. That kind of feeling, you know, this sort of like you're listening to, like you're walking into a giant field house filled with people, but you're alone. And the sounds kind of echo from one side to another. That's kind of the feeling that it has. And it's really gorgeous. It's a very gorgeous album. Very lush, very gorgeous. There isn't too much Phil Spector style drums, you know, like doom, 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 cat. Just a little bit in this one song. And then, you know, now that I'm listening to the lyrics on my 4th or 5th listen, I have to ask myself, are the lyrics great? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes the lyrics are really interesting. This track, actually, I had to actually rewind it to hear it, to believe what they were saying. I know you love me. I know why you hurt me. Okay, that's a pretty strong lyric about a bad relationship. I will escape you and your so-called affection. Walk out on your half erection. I'm not a woman. I've never been in a romantic relationship with a man. But I assume that this line is really good. I mean, obviously it's a little bit crude, but it feels super real. I will escape your so-called affection and walk out on your half erection. There is something about that, which I don't know, but I imagine that if I had ever been in a relationship with a man and the nature of like desire and lust and a lack of intimacy, I think this line is great. But I haven't lived it. But I feel as though it's something that has been lived. It's just great. The next track is called Silence. Insane. Insane track. All these different weird loops. Like this weird, like these rhythm loops, like almost a randomly arpeggiated harpsichord, and then these keyboards that sweep in and out, and then her lyrics come floating on top. Really great. She sings the same line kind of over and over again, almost in a round. It becomes a sort of rhythmic orgy. It's quite interesting. And then track 3 is the first of the interludes. These weird slowed down tracks. And I think the interludes are essential to this album. I think if you're going to have an album and try and make it feel dreamlike, while feeling cohesive, these are like the little seams that keep the little bits together. They're not really music, they're not really songs, but they keep it flowing. The next track is I'll Be the Death of You. This almost reminded me of like commercials for technical colleges in the 1980s. Just, you know, drum machine. But what's great is the way they take the drum machine out at times. And the way the chorus comes in, you just get really, it's very inspirational. And she sings the line over and over again, I'll be the death of you, and then goes up high. And then at the end, I just wrote over and over again in my notes, so lush, so lush, so lush. Just everything, all these layers. It's a good croissant. I'm going back to the croissant metaphor now. It's a good croissant, where it's so flaky. Then there's a Swedish interlude. I contacted my friend Matthias about his, he's from Sweden, and I asked him, what are they saying here? And apparently it's like a sample from a documentary, and it's basically about the nature of happiness and sadness and feeling like you don't know how to access happiness. It's something about having happiness in a little bag. I don't know. Then that leads into The Prophet, which has these really submerged double vocals, which leads into a really nice chorus with a good breakdown. Even the worst songs on this album, like this is probably my least favorite, have good parts to it. Like a really nice, like leading into the chorus where things go back and things get more complex, and little twirly keyboard moments at the end, layers upon layers upon layers. The next track, Neon Lights, sounds very Kraftwerky. R.I.P. to the guy from Kraftwerk who died. Oh my God, I should know the name of that guy. Gunter. But it's really nice because, again, her voice comes in, and her voice has the ability to soften anything. So if you have a very kind of industrial sounding techno thing, her voice can just make it all ethereal. The next track, I Live at Night, has another one of these great lyrics. I often tremble with the truth. So she's Swedish, so English is not her first language. I think sometimes that creates the opportunity for unexpectedly beautiful lyrics. I often tremble with the truth. I often tremble with the truth. Often? More often than not, tremble with the truth. It's great. This has a bass line. There isn't that much bass on this album, but when it's used, like actual bass, like, you know, a bass being played, there's plenty of keyboard bass. It's like this authentic instrument that comes in, and it may be the highlight of the whole album for me. Just this one bass line coming in on this one song. And that's what's so nice, is there's so many different instances, moments in this album where just the layer comes in, and it's like that time when you're eating a good fresh croissant. And if you've ever had a good croissant, by the way, you don't know what I'm talking about. And basically you haven't lived, so go to a good bakery. But like where you just take a bite randomly and it's just like there must have been some butter or something, it just hits you just right. The next track has the most smogs, even more than their name. This track, You Have Traveled for Miles Without Love in Your Eyes, has a cool kind of spooky sample, and drum machines comes in, and dreamy synths, and very, very, very well layered again. And then it ends with almost a gritty industrial part. My only complaint is this. You've traveled for miles? Miles? You're from Sweden. You've traveled for kilometers. You see? Do you see why we don't abandon miles? Miles are very poetic. Kilometers are not poetic. Miles are poetic. It's because we're so poetic in America. That's why we don't use the imperial measurement system. Then the final sort of real track is the one I played for you, Death Engine. And when I first heard it, I thought it was cheesy. By the time I was done listening to it the first time, I thought it was pretty. And then it became in my mind all the time, and now I have to listen to just that part. Do as much as I possibly can. All of just these layers coming in and out, this church feeling. It really has a kind of church feeling, and the lyrics themselves, you know, you can bring me salvation, but can you bring me death? Or can you save me from... No, you can bring me salvation, but can you save my life? Lots of themes of death on this track, very kind of goth. Is there an overlap between shoegaze and goth, or is it just kind of dark imagery? That's another thing I would like people to put in the comments, because I don't know. As a rule, I love all goth music, so maybe. Another dreamy synth interlude, and then the last track is almost an interlude as a last track. It's just a super vocoder song. It's called Depression Tourist. Radiohead, where were you? Why didn't you write Depression Tourist? That's a great title. But it's very pretty. And this is the thing. Ever since Autotune came out, vocoders, like you learn to appreciate what vocoders can do. And I happened to read the Wikipedia about I Break Horses, and they included a negative review in their description, saying that it was music made by computers for computers. Hey, buddy, screw you. Like, if you listen to this, yes, it's made by computers, right? But especially the vocoder has a very human quality. And I think this whole album is very human. I don't feel it's particularly electronic. I feel that it really connects to me, and it establishes this very human, dreamlike atmosphere. So there you go. I Break Horses. It's a bean dip, it's a croissant, it's It's Skye at age 20 wearing sunglasses. This is ironic, by the way. I didn't think I actually looked cool there. So there you go. All right. Well, it's Thursday, so this is going to be my last review of new music of this week. Whole new slew, a rock slide of music is coming out tomorrow. So until next time, for Toby, who's been exiled to the bedroom, and for Dr. and Mrs. Payne, there's the camera.